So chapter 13. Chapter 13 talks about technology. Okay? So technology, it talks about old technology, writing paper. New technologies would be computers. Now, even you can tell that this is a little older of a textbook because how many people here have an iPod that looks like this? Three people. You know these, but I'm not sure you have computers that look like this, yeah? Cell phones that look like this. So as technology increases, okay, um, things usually get better. There are different problems, different stuff like that. Industrialization is when an economic system based on large industries instead of like shops. So instead of you going to the shoemaker, shoes are made mass produced. Yes? When we had a whole bunch of a revolution is a big change in once. The industrial revolution started at the beginning of or the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th. So 1900s, 1880 kind of thing. So as it as we started to revolutionize business and farming, things started to change a lot. We are going through right now, like the internet, the typewriter, the no, not the typewriter, the it's a different type of revolution. Anyways, computer. So, industrial revolution started to use mechanical power instead of what did they use before? You guys know? Horses or water, actually. Okay, so a lot of things, yeah, you would have like a donkey or an ox or whatever walk in circles for your mill. Okay, so your mill, you didn't want to feed this ox all the time, so you'd put it beside a river, and the river would run, and it would make this mill go around. And then they realized that, wait a second, if we can burn something, we can burn coal, and that heats it up, and that starts to move it. We can just run this, and we don't need to be. We can put it in the middle of a prairie. We don't need it by a river. We don't need it, but we can put it in the middle of a city, and we can have these industries, these massive factories, and we can run them off coal instead of running them off the water. Because the water, the big mills, like the big water wheels, those would start things turning, and that would make the whole. So the only thing that we changed really was we went away from water, went to coal, so we could burn that. Okay, machines started to do it a lot more, a lot faster. Okay, before it was called a cottage industry because so look at this picture on page 289. We've got a shoemaker making a shoe. Then we've got a factory on the right. How many more people are employed in the factory? How many more shoes can be made? With more shoes, you need less profit, okay? Because you have 3,000 shoes instead of one shoe. So out of those 3,000 shoes, if you make $1 each, you've made $3,000. To make the same off that one shoe, you have to sell it for $3,000. Okay? So the more shoes you make, the less profit you have to make because it's just economies of scale. Okay? Working in the factories was not fun. Division of labor was you hammer the third nail in every single time. You have 4 strikes, that's it. Lauren will sit there and she will screw a bolt every time it comes around. That's all she does. She puts a bolt, she grabs another bolt, she puts it in, grabs another bolt, puts it in, grabs another bolt, puts it in. So the more she does this, the faster she gets at it, because she becomes really easy at it, right? The more you do something, the easier it becomes, correct? So if you've done this 5,000 times a day, you can do this really easy and really quick and really it's no problem. It's boom, 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 boom. You don't know how to make a car, but you can put that bolt into this door as fast as you can. So if we have 5,000, 2,000 workers, we can put together a car, no problem, like 1 car a day, because everybody does their part and it goes really, really quickly. As opposed to Lauren starting with the door and making that door and putting this, and then she has to learn how to become a mechanic and put together put the windshield in and put the tires on, oh my God, that's a lot of skills. She doesn't need a lot of skills. She needs one skill, to be able to turn righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Yeah? So she does this over and over and over and over and over and over and over. Do you think that she needs to be well educated for this?
No.
No. So anybody can do this.
Well, no, you have
So all these farmers, because if you're starting to use different techniques, different farming techniques, you start to use a tractor, if you start to use different planting techniques, different field rotations, so that farming becomes better, you don't have to have one person work this farm. If I gave you a pair of scissors, how long do you think it would take you to cut the field outside? A week?
no, like a month.
So a month. So a month, and then you'd have to go back and recut it all. So your job would just to cut the grass every other month for 4 months, and you'd be like, oh my God, I'm exhausted. So if I gave you 6 of these fields, could you ever farm these fields?
No.
No, because you only have scissors. Now if I gave you a scythe, a big knife, you could swing and you could just cut it all down, and you got really good with this. So you improve the technology, and you can now work more farm, right? You can now do 2 or 3 city blocks. If I gave you a ride-along mower, could you do this in one day? Yes. So now you can do 30 of these fields in the same time it took you to do one, if you get the right technology. So if that's 29 people that don't have a job because Lauren can do 30 of these fields instead of the one field. Okay, so she buys 30 fields, 29 people can move into the city, get a regular paycheck, because these Lauren is still going like, well, if I have a crappy year, if there's no wheat, if there's no rain, if there's too many bugs, if there's whatever, she goes hungry. 29 people can go to the factory and get a regular paycheck every day. Every week, every month. It's going to be the same one. You work 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, whatever, 12 hours a day. Now, this is where unions start to become in. Okay? Assembly line is when we do you put the bolts in, somebody else puts another bolt, somebody else you do one job over and over and over. That's an assembly line, okay? You guys know about assembly lines?
Yes, like,
Okay, have you guys ever made cookies using an assembly line? Done the dishes with assembly line?
no.
You do dishes with the assembly line. How many people like wash a plate and then dry their own plates and then put it away if there's 3 people?
We use a technology called dishwasher. No, I wash dishes with my hands.
Okay, so if you're washing by hands, mostly one person will wash, hand it to this person, they'll dry, hand it to somebody else, they'll put it away. Okay, whatever it is. So, when we go back to working in the factories, we needed a lot of different things. Meat packing plants were really bad at the time. You needed unions, okay, and unions became actually quite beneficial to people, because if I'm a shop owner, I will work you until you quit and then find somebody else, because there are 29 people outside of my door and 29 people brand new every single day. Just as the more and more and more they come, you guys as a laborer, you're not special. A lot of people can screw in a bolt, correct? So I don't need to so Lauren doesn't show up, she's 2 minutes late one day. I hire JM. JM, how long do you think it'll take you to learn how to screw in a bolt? 20 minutes? Wow. So it's righty-tighty? Yes, it's righty-tighty. So, but to get as good as Lauren, you're right, probably about an hour. So after an hour, he's right up to speed. Lauren, you're out of a job. You were 2 minutes late. Okay? So she has to wait until somebody else screws up. Do you see how replaceable you guys are? Is this good for Lauren? No. Now, there's a whole bunch of different machinery, and as it's moving fast, you have to, as this thing comes by, as this meat of leg comes by, I'm expecting you to grab your super sharp knife, grab the fat, trim it off as it moves, so you walk down the line and you start to hack fat at it. Okay? You just cut off all the fat. That's what I'm expecting. Does this sound dangerous?
Yes.
Okay, good. Now, what happens if I slide fish towards you, or if I slide half of a pig? Okay? I slide half of a pig towards you. It's covered in blood because I literally just skinned it. Okay? It was killed. 2 minutes later, I skin it. 3 minutes later, you have it. It's still kind of, it's got a lot of blood all over it. You have to cut the different parts of the meat. You're working with really sharp. I'm saying you have to get through 20 pieces of pig. You have to get 20 pigs per hour, which means you have 3 minutes to do this pig. You have to cut it up. You have to do this. You have to do all that. So you're flying. Now your finger, this knife cuts off your thumb. Just the tip of it. You guys ever done that when you're chopping something? You just kind of chop the tip of your finger and you're like, ah! And it's kind of a wake-up call. Okay, so what happens if you chop like 2 centimeters of your finger? Now you've got a little bit of the bone showing. You know that. What happens if you leave your job? Jam, how'd you get your job? Because Lauren took a break, right? Okay, there's a whole bunch of people that can do what you do. So you take a cloth, you wrap it around. What happened to your thumb? It doesn't matter. Keep chopping. So it's lost in the meat. This is a true story. If you guys want a great book, read Upton Sinclair. It's called The Jungle. Okay. Okay, fantastic, fantastic. But it was about, so we need a whole bunch of little fingers and little hands, because when we stop the machine, we have like maybe 3 minutes, and bone and cartilage and extra meats and fats and eyeball and hair and all these things get caught up in the machinery, right? So we need, because somebody missed an eyeball, so you put it in. No, not my eyeball, like the pig's eyeball. So with technology, you need these little kids. They use their hands. They reach in. They pull out these meats. Okay? You put this bone, sticks in. We think it's off. It's not actually off. As the kid reaches in, grabs the bone, pulls it out, it starts up again. The kid loses his arm.
How did it lose his arm? It's a bone.
Yep. It's a machine.
Oh,
He pulls a bone out of the machine starts back up and chops his arm. Or he gets it caught somewhere. You get your hair caught, it rips your skull off. Like this is like really, really, really nasty times. Okay? So they form unions because Lauren realizes that if JM doesn't take his or her job, if they join together and they say, look, you can't fire us for being 2 minutes late, JM will realize that I can be then 2 minutes late and I won't lose my job. It's better security if we all bond together. We can make laws like 7-year-olds can't work in a factory. You can't work us 14 hours a day. They would do things like open the door at 9:01, work you until 10 and not pay you for that hour because it wasn't a full hour. Hour starts at 9, goes till 10. You didn't work from 9 till 10. We're not paying you for 9 till 10. If you got pissed off, Lauren's like, well, this isn't fair. That's fine. Go outside. JM, come here. So she doesn't say anything. So we end the day at 7 o'clock, except I turn the machines off at 6:58. Why would I do that? So I don't have to pay you. So you've just lost 2 hours of work. I've gotten almost 2 hours of free work off of you. Is this fair? No. So you guys bond together and you guys go on strike and you guys are like, look, we're not working for you guys. You have to hire us according to these guidelines. This is what we decide. We agree on this. Okay? This is why communism took off, is because it was capitalism versus communism, the workers versus the shop owners. Okay? So this is the factories at the time. Factory really, 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 really helps. It really helps everything. Things get cheaper because you can buy a shoe for $1 instead of $3,000. Okay? Remember that analogy? You can get wheat because Lauren is looking for, she's farming 30 fields while working in the factory. She's quite the worker. Caitlin, the farmer, is working 30 fields. She still needs $3,000 to feed her family, but she only needs $3,000 from 30 fields, which is $10 per field, instead of $3,000 from one field, which she needed before. So instead of $3,000 per field, it's $10 per field. So food for us is going down. Shoes for us is going down. Everything is going down. Plus labor starts to go up. Okay? It talks about this in the 1880s. Charon worked in a cigar factory. He was 14 years old in 88. He answered questions about his job. You began working at 11 years old. It was a dollar. So it's actually quite interesting, but talks about what we just talked about here. Okay? Expanding industry. Number of people in the workforce as it goes up. Dollar value of manufactured goods goes up. Dollar values exported goes up. All of it's getting better for us. Okay? First Nations, getting worse. We prevent the First Nations from working because we're racist. We are incredibly racist. We don't believe that they should, oh, look, you have reserves, you have to stay on your reserves. You can't you can't maintain your First Nations treaty and come and work in the cow. You can't take a job from JM and get free land. It's just unfair. Okay? So still a lot of racism. The car starts to come about. You guys know how the car has changed things, yes? From today. Imagine life without a car. Yeah? Yeah. Okay? Mass media. So mass media changes things because we can get our message across the country. So governments can tell and explain why they think that this policy is important. They can bond Canada over those things. If you guys talk to a lot of 65, 70-year-olds, there were no other Canadian teams, so there are a lot of them are Toronto fans or Montreal fans. That's it. Toronto Maple Leafs, Montreal Canadiens, because that was what's on the radio. Those were the hockey teams. It was Montreal, Chicago, Detroit, New York, Boston, and then I missed one. Toronto. Okay? So those are the 6 teams you had. You're not going to cheer for Canadians. You always get to see Toronto. It's always in English. Montreal's in French. I don't understand French. I became a Maple Leafs fan. Okay? Now they're poisoning our kids and they're making them Leafs fan. It's awful. Becoming Kings fans instead of Flames fans. Ridiculous. Kings aren't Kings. Yeah. How many we won ever? So, an industrial society. How many of you won this year? Yeah? How's that going for you? We made the playoffs, man. So, an industrial society. Thank you. I know. You don't have to clap for the Flames. They know they're awesome. They made the playoffs this year, man. They made the playoffs. So, the First World War. This industrialism changed things because you could use the assembly line. So we could make tanks. Because we had such cheap food, we could ship it to Europe. We could help them with their war. Okay? The World War was big. So was World War II. Really big. Especially, it started to, what? World War I was the one from 14 till 19, I believe.
It said, yeah, 19.
14 to 18. Okay. World War II was 39 to 45. Both of them had Germany. The second one had Nazis. Okay. Yeah. Asians came to Canada 1800s. They're internment camps. We'll talk about that after. Okay. So this is the unions that we're talking about. Early factories were not nice places to work. I was trying to tell you why. We've talked about residential schools, not a nice place to go. We explain why in chapter 12, I believe. Suburbs, more people that came to downtown Calgary, the more people wanted their own house, especially after World War II, the white picket fence dream. Okay? So you want a white picket fence, you want a yard, you want to be able to raise your kids, you don't want to share an apartment with somebody else. So you start to make suburban places. So places that are not downtown, but just suburbs outside of it. Okay? What's a suburb? Like a neighborhood outside of downtown. Yes. Okay. Women. During the war, when all the men go away to work, women step up and start to do the work for the men in factories. They realize that they're capable of people. They're capable people. They have thoughts. They're not useless. They can do other things other than be a teacher, a nurse, or a mom or a secretary. Okay, those were their three job options. They start to work in the factories and they realize, hey, we're just as good as men. Okay, the Canadian government, they start to ask for voting. The Canadian government says no. They start to ask again and again and again and over and over and over for voting. Canadian government says no, you're not smart enough. You're not smart enough. You're not smart enough. They finally concede, and they make it so that, because there was an issue in the very First World War about conscription. So if JM decided to volunteer for the army and Fabio said no, Fabio gets to live here peace-free. Well, Fabio. Okay, so JM goes and works and he has the worst time and he may get killed. JM dies over there in the war. Fabio's here, he's living the life. JM's dead. Fabio gets to live all this life. He's healthy enough he can go fight. We need him to go fight. He refuses to go fight. So the Canadian government comes through and conscripts people, and they force people to go fight. They draw names out of a hat, and they force people to go fight. Now, the people that are back in Canada, Fabio decides, no, I don't want this. They think, the Canadian government thinks they may lose this vote, because all of the people that go away to fight are either fighting so they can vote, or they're dead because they've died. There's a lot of Canadians that die. So they're worried that they're going to lose this vote. So the Canadian government gives the women the vote if they have a family member that's fighting for the army. So if JM's sister or mother can vote, Fabio's sister and mother cannot vote, because he's not fighting for his country. So this sways the vote to conscription, but it also gives women the vote. This is the very first time that women can vote. So Fabio starts to be conscripted, which means that, do you think the French wanted to go fight for Britain in the war? No. It started to become French versus English in Canada. Okay? It wasn't a lot of English people going like, oh no, I just choose not to. A lot of English people jumped right on board. A lot of French people did the same, but not as many as the English. So it started to be divided. Okay? So they gave women the vote, and then they realized, wait a second, we've given them the vote. They might have to keep the vote from now on. The men come back from the war. They want their jobs back. After World War I, they kind of get their jobs back. After World War II, the women say, screw you, nice try. Women enter the workforce in droves. Okay? It starts to be equality after that. Suffrage is the fight for the vote. Okay? It talks about on page 2 or 302, talks about person. Are you a person? Is the girl sitting next to you a person? Believe it or not, the government of Canada did not always regard women and girls as persons. Okay? The Depression. Shh. The Depression. After the war, because of stocks, because a lot of people bought a lot of stocks, it crashed in 1929. 1930, no, the stock market crashed. Okay? After the stock market is where you trade bonds. So a company starts and they sell shares, and if we make money, your share goes up. It's a perceived value of a company. So these stocks are sold on a stock market. You can buy part of this company, and if your stock goes up and then you sell it to somebody else, but it's all make-believe. At this point, it was all basically make-believe, okay? Put your hands down for now. 1929 in October, the stock markets crash. Everybody loses a whole bunch of money. There's wind and a drought that starts to blow the topsoil off the farms. So farmers can't make their payments, which means they default on their loans, which means there's not enough food. Okay? There's not enough food, so people start to starve. There's not enough money, so factories start to close, which means that there's no more people making anything. So everything stops. And for about 6, 7, 8 years, until we got out of the Great Depression, 7 years, people were living on nothing. Absolutely nothing. Farmer, it would be better to just leave everything from your farm and walk off your farm than to continue farming. It just didn't make any sense. Okay? So as we go through the social services in Canada, we start to put in an old age pension in 27. We start to put in employment insurance if you lose your job. Okay, it came after depression. If you lose your job, you're going to get a set amount of pay. Okay, even though you're not working. Family allowance, public health care in 47, which means everybody pays into health care, everybody gets to use it. Not if you have insurance, you get to use it. We used to be American. The doctors said, no, this is not a good idea. The doctors like public health care now. Okay, return of the war got us out of the depression. That's the end of chapter 13.